All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. As people are joining, I just want to welcome you all and thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to say a few words by way of welcoming remarks, but I wanted to just start out by letting you know that this session is being recorded, and you will be able to access this recording later after our discussion. So it is a real pleasure to welcome you to the University of Southern California Gould School of Law's panel discussion on human rights advocacy before the United Nations and other global fora with respect to Black victims of police brutality, peaceful protesters, and systemic racism in the United States. Thank you so much for joining us. And my deepest thanks to our distinguished panelists, Ms. Collette Flanagan and Mr. Jamil Darkwar, who are on the front lines doing this important human rights advocacy work. We so appreciate you both taking time to speak with us today. So my name is Garry, and I am clinical professor of law here at USC Gould and direct the International Human Rights Clinic, which engages law students in legal representation and advocacy for the purposes of upholding fundamental human rights for all, including those right here at home. And this fall, we have two student attorneys who I just want to give a shout out to, Ava Habibian and Laura Penaranda, who have had the honor of coming alongside some of the critical global efforts that you're going to hear about from our panelists today on behalf of Black lives here in the United States. Now, before I turn and introduce our panelists and moderate, I'd like to just say a few words of appreciation to those who have made today's event possible. First, I want to begin by acknowledging and thanking our co-sponsors at USC Gould, namely Dean Andrew Guzman and Professor Sam Ehrman, who's here with us, who invited this discussion as the first in a three-part series on the pursuit of justice, conversations on inequality and activism. I also want to extend sincere thanks to our wonderful staff, particularly Angie Huff and Mira Dalp on our academic operations team, as well as Ben Dimapindan on our communications team for all their efforts in setting up and advertising this event. Now, as I turn to introduce our panelists for this timely discussion, I do so in commemoration of the memory of George Floyd, Arbery Ahmed, Breonna Taylor, Julian Edward Roosevelt, Anthony McLean, Trayford Pellerin, Dijon Kazee, and Dion Kay. This is a non-exhaustive list of Black lives lost to police violence just in the past several months during this COVID pandemic. And it does not include the many who have been seriously injured at the hands of police, such as Jacob Blake, shot in the back 7 times in August in Kenosha, Wisconsin, in front of his children, and now paralyzed. These killings and maiming without accountability in the span of only 6 months have unveiled deep systemic racism and deadly bias pervasive within US law enforcement, rooted in this country's history of racism across various sectors of our society, whether it be with regard to criminal justice, healthcare, education, voting rights, and others. And they've resulted in widespread peaceful protests across dozens of US cities for months. Today, our panelists are going to highlight specifically the critical work that is being done by families of victims and advocates in the US, as well as abroad, to bring attention to these injustices at this pivotal moment in this nation's history. So first, we're going to hear from Ms. Collette Flanagan, founder of Mothers Against Police Brutality, who will speak about the shameful legacy of Black victims of police brutality and systemic racism in law enforcement in the United States. Collette will focus particularly on recent events to date since the killing of George Floyd, who cried out for his own mother as he was being killed on May 25th, 2020. Collette will also speak with us about the role of her organization in speaking out, not just in the halls of power here in the United States, but also on the global stage, calling for universal human rights, an end to the violence, and accountability. After Collette's son, Clinton Allen, was shot to death by a Dallas police officer in March 2013 while unarmed, once in the arm, 5 times in the chest, and once in the back, she turned her grief and anger at the vilification of her son and the impunity enjoyed by the killer into action by founding Mothers Against Police Brutality, an intergenerational, multi-ethnic, multicultural organization with a local, national, and increasingly international presence. A former IBM executive, Collette quickly built MAPB into a powerful presence and voice before Congress, the United Nations, and just this week, just a few days ago, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, on behalf of all mothers and families of victims of police homicide. Just recently, she commemorated the stolen birthday and stolen life of her son, Clinton, on September 29th. In honor of his memory, she has emerged as one of America's most effective advocates for peace and justice through the movement to end police violence and systemic racism in the United States. After Collette, we will hear from Mr. Jamil Darkwar, who is director of the American Civil Liberty Union's Human Rights Program, who will focus his remarks on the global protests by the thousands in a number of countries, including South Africa, France, Sweden, the United Kingdom, Australia, Zimbabwe, Japan, and others that occurred in the aftermath of George Floyd's killing in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. Jamil will speak about the role that the ACLU and civil society has played in seizing the moment to advocate for universal human rights for Black lives before the United Nations and regional and international human rights mechanisms, and how they have worked with families of Black victims to call upon countries around the globe to remind the United States of its legal obligation to end systemic racism and police violence and to respect the rights of peaceful protesters rather than respond with militarized use of force. As director of the ACLU's Human Rights Program, Jamil leads a team of lawyers and researchers advising the ACLU's programs on international human rights law. He also oversees the ACLU's human rights documentation, advocacy, and litigation before international bodies, including the UN Human Rights System and the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Prior to joining the ACLU, he worked at Human Rights Watch, and before moving to the US, he was a senior attorney with Adalah, the Legal Center for Arab Minority Rights in Israel. Jamil is an adjunct professor at Hunter College, Bard College, and John Jay College of Criminal Justice at CUNY. After we hear from Collette and Jamil, I'll go ahead and moderate our Q&A. And while all of you will be muted during their presentations, I'd like to invite you to post your questions to the chat at any time. And I'd be happy to read them out to our panelists after they have concluded their remarks. And now, I'd like to invite you, Collette, to begin your presentation, after which, Jamil, please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, everyone, for having me today. I think it's so important to give an insight glimpse of what families go through when they lose a child or a loved one to official police homicide, to police violence. As Hannah stated, my only son, Clinton Allen, was killed in 2013 by a Dallas policeman. He was only 25 years old. He left 2 twin boys, and that is what brought me to the fight. But not just Clinton's egregious death, but the indifference that was shown to our family by the detectives, the district attorneys. We were deliberately left out of the investigation process. And these are things that people don't see, that what families have to go through, and what causes even more of a disconnect and even more grief within the family. Your child has just been killed and you can't get any information. For us, we didn't know where Clinton's body was for almost 2 days. No one would even talk to us. I had a girlfriend who's an ex-colleague of mine when I worked at Oracle. She's white, and she would call and they would give her any information that they wanted. And in the first 2 weeks, that is how we got the information on what was going on, was through my friend who was white, and that would call. We decided to file a complaint with Internal Affairs, and we thought, well, if we file a complaint, that'll get them to talk to us. And we were told that we could not even file a complaint against the policeman that had killed Clinton. Because I refused to leave that day, they finally relented, but they tried to intimidate me and they threatened me. And they made it very clear. If we find one sentence in your complaint that is not true, we will prosecute you to the fullest. And keep in mind, I am a mother who had just lost my only son, my every heartbeat. I'm making funeral arrangements, and at the same time, I'm trying to get information on what happened to Clinton. And this is why Mothers Against Police Brutality was created, because I knew that there had to be other mothers that were going through the same thing, or if not worse. And as I began to talk to other mothers and other families, I was completely horrified that the same thing was happening nationally in all the district attorney's offices, all the police department. It was the same culture, a culture of deceit, impunity, and flawed investigations that the intent was always to exonerate police officers when they kill. Only this year was MAPB able to get the Dallas Police Department to drug test policemen after they killed people. Over 40 years of exonerating policemen in Dallas, shooting after shooting. Police officers were never drug tested after they shot and killed someone. So what does that tell you? It's a deep-seated culture, not only in that police department, but it's the norm nationwide to protect officers. It's the offspring of qualified immunity that police officers enjoy. In short, the police unions tell the police officers when they kill someone to just say, I feared for my life, which is why we hear that all the time. It's their national anthem of deceit, is what I call it. And the police unions are very powerful. You've probably heard there are a few bad apples theory. 99% of police officers are good and they do their job with integrity. And it's just 1% that's bad. And I wish that was true, but it simply isn't. You know, a few bad apples don't kill over 1,000 people a year, right? What we're dealing with is an orchard of trees with diseased roots, and they are bearing rotten fruit, and they are preying upon Americans, especially Black American and poor communities where they don't have the resources to obtain attorneys. And so we see that these policemen are, it's part of the culture that they come from. It's a deep-seated culture that dates back to slave patrolling, when Black bodies had bounties on them, dead or alive. Just bring the body back as proof that you did your job. But what I can tell you is when a family sues for a wrongful death, and you would be surprised the venom that some families experience, and even choosing that option, it's a tool. It's the only remedy that they have to try to fight back in a sense, and hoping that any settlement would be instrumental in disrupting that city's budget that is funding police departments with bad practices. And what I can also tell you is that if families were given a choice of getting rid of qualified immunity or seeing Tennessee versus Garner overthrown or repealed, they would rather see Tennessee versus Garner repealed, taking away that phrase in there that gives police officers impunity in court, that all an officer needs is a probable cause. And replacing that with an absolute use of force policy that gives clear directives on when deadly force can be used. In my world, deadly force would never be used, but that's another discussion. Families want this more than anything because this means that if Tennessee versus Garner is repealed, that it would save lives, that officers would have to think before choosing to use deadly force. And that within itself would be a game changer in policing, because no amount of money can bring back your child or replace that loss. Then you have to ask yourself, why isn't Congress or the DOJ not tying federal funding to police departments based on reviews of incidents involving the use of force? A report that would be required when the use of force is used. At the very least, it would start giving us some type of data of how often excessive force is even being used. We need policies in every police department that requires an early warning system. The cop that killed Clinton was a trouble officer, had that early warning system that is now in place because of MAPB's work. Had that early warning system been in place when Clinton came in contact with Clark Starler, he would be alive because that early warning system would have detected that he was a problem officer. Things like banning shooting at vehicles. You know, why are policemen shooting at vehicles that are going away, not being confrontational, shooting into vehicles 50 and 75 times? Formally adopting a de-escalation policy as an agency policy, putting it in the general orders. What a lot of people don't know, that most police departments do not have a de-escalation agency policy, which requires police officers to de-escalate. It is a choice that police officers are given. You can de-escalate or you can escalate. Placing the sanctity on human life at the core of all training. This would reset the bad policing culture that now exists. Requiring officers to intervene and prevent other officers from using deadly force. We are also working with a group in Houston on a whistleblower law for policemen to come forward. That within itself tells you the many officers that we've talked to that want to, that are there when incidents happen. They see their fellow officers beating someone or shooting someone or using excessive force when they shouldn't have. A lot of them are afraid to come forward because they feel retaliation or losing their job. That within itself tells you how aggressive and how bad the police culture is when you have the police themselves that are afraid to come forward. And that's not all. Some policemen, they hold the line. It's a brotherhood. They don't want to come forward. But then you do have some that do. And we have to make that space available for the policemen who want to do the right thing and who want to come forward. The other thing that we're working on is that there is an act called the Hatch Act that the FBI agents are the only ones right now in the law enforcement branch. They cannot engage in any political activity. So why isn't that for every civil service employee? What if your city council candidate could no longer take endorsements from police unions? What if district attorneys could no longer take endorsements from police unions and mayors? That would be a game changer. They would not be going into office beholden to the agenda of police unions. So that's a very important issue that we think that is very important, and we would like to see happen federally. This is why there is a movement to defund the police. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. How do we expect police departments to ever change their practices when we continue to fund them year after year but they never commit to better their practices. And in many cities, their budgets, a third or more of their budgets are allocated to police departments that are doing the same thing year after year. And there are Black and brown communities that those funds can be, that some of those funds can be reallocated for and use some of those dollars for healthcare centers and homelessness and housing needs, after school programs. And they could benefit from taking some of the money out of police budget. MAPB believes that those closest to the problem are the ones that are closest to the solution, but we're far too often removed from the decision-making process. For this reason, we base our work on the lived experience of families. How can you write policies if you don't know what families experience when their loved ones are killed? Families give us an intimate insight of police departments, how district attorneys behave, how they handle their cases, how grand juries behave, what they've gone through. No one can give us these inside glimpses but families. For instance, people are just now getting a glimpse of how grand juries behave because of the Breonna Taylor's case right now. The current events in the Kentucky Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, is being sued to release the grand jury transcripts. But even before that case, the same thing happened to our family. The same thing happened when we asked to speak to the grand jury on behalf of Clinton. The district attorney at the time in Dallas told us that the grand jury declined to speak with us, only to find out later that he never even approached the grand jury. And when they came out of the grand jury process, the attorney for the cop who shot Clinton and the district attorneys came out and gave each other high five. They were working in symphony. No one was representing Clinton behind the closed doors in the meeting with the grand jury. And I can only surmise the reason why this attorney general is fighting releasing those grand jury tapes is because the same thing has happened behind closed doors. No one was fighting for Breonna Taylor. Everything was scripted and organized to exonerate the policemen that were involved in her killing. But what the media and most of you never see about is the carnage and the havoc that's left behind for surviving members. Families are utterly destroyed in the aftermath of these police killings. We get a few glimpses in the newspaper, man shot on the east side. What you don't hear about or see about is, you know, man was shot on the east side, and when his family identified him, he had 4 bullet shots to the head. The family could not afford to bury that person. And if your loved one is killed by policemen, there is no such thing as victim compensation, just for the mere fact that a policeman killed you. And there is a victims compensation program in almost every state. But if a policeman kills you, it automatically disqualifies you for any of those services, which means that there is no financial help to help bury your child or your loved one. There's no mental services available for yourself or for any siblings that may be left behind in the aftermath. And, you know, for most families that have lost through police violence, they go through an isolation and a debilitating grief that takes away your ability to function in a normal, everyday capacity. The ability to support your family is often lost through this life-changing grief. Your health deteriorates. Many mothers and fathers, such as myself, experience PTSD, heart problems, hypertension, and a lot of other ailments that are caused by the debilitating grief of losing your child. Just this year, in 2 years, of Clinton's birthday. We just celebrate, he would have been 33 years old on the 29th. I have not been hospitalized for hypertension. Blood pressure of 202/124. Just thinking of what we lost and how Clinton should be here just almost shuts my body down. It's a byproduct of the dark grief that often impales me and other moms, that the memories that send you into a tailspin. I've never had hypertension problems in my life, but it speaks to how debilitating and shattering this grief is. And then we think about the communities. What happens to the communities that have to embrace these broken families? We have almost 400 mothers in our sphere. We even have mothers that have had 3 and 4 family members killed by policemen. And many of these families are already struggling because of economic disparities that Black people experience in America. And then having now the grief on top of that to deal with that is very, it's a very, very hard struggle. And every time there's a police shooting, it's a triggering event for families. It's almost like someone passed by, do a drive-by and throw a hand grenade into your lap. But MAPB knows that empowering of our mothers to become change agents in their community is giving them the power to turn their grief into fuel and to take their lives back. With a base of over 400 mothers, we know that we can be a very powerful, and that we are a very powerful force demanding change on many levels. Along with our policy work, we are pleased to announce our first, and hopefully many to come, MAPB Legacy Fellowship Program, which will start in the spring of 2021. The MAPB Legacy Fellowship Program is a 2-year program designed for mothers who have lost a child through police violence. It is designed to motivate, to inspire, and to cultivate the mothers to build on their strengths and to become effective change agents in their communities and beyond. We have to rebuild these families, or we lose more than just a child. We lose a generation of mothers that are matriarchs and grandmothers, sisters and confidants, and the arcs of many families. These mothers are the birth rooms of the universe. If we're going to exist in this world, I always say, you have to come through a woman. And how powerful is that, a mother? But losing a child is the most devastating loss that you can ever imagine. The grief literally changes your DNA. And when you lose a child to the betrayal at the hands of a police officer, it is a layer of grief that entombs you forever. I did not lose a child, I lost a lifetime. And I will end with a short video of mothers who have also lost their children to police brutality. Thank you for having me today. It was my complete honor to be here.
My name is QUINTA Sanders. My son's name is Torrey Sanders. He was murdered May 5th, 2017 in Charleston, Missouri, Mississippi County in a sheriff's department. He was murdered by the sheriffs, jailers, and also police officers of Charleston, Missouri, Mississippi County. A mother never wants to bury her child. Yes, I had to bury my son. Next month would have been his 32nd birthday. He didn't get to make it there. We paid an awful big price. Not only myself, not only his siblings, he has 2 brothers, but also his children.
We miss you, Daddy!
What a big price we had to pay. Yes, their daddy won't be there to walk his girls down the aisle. Their daddy won't be there to see his sons graduate. their daddy won't be there to take that ride with them to college. He was having a crisis. He was a medical patient, but instead of getting him help, they decided to take his life, not get him any help. We want our children to grow up with their fathers. We want our children to grow up with their mothers. No one should think they have the right to take another person's life just because you wear a badge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Collette, for that very moving presentation and for the video. Jamil, would you like to take it from here, please?
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. It's really hard to go after watching this short part of the video. I encourage all of you to watch the whole video that's on the website of Mothers Against Police Brutality, which was also presented by Collette during the hearing that we had earlier this week before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. I want to thank you for this invitation, for giving me the honor to join Collette in speaking a little bit about our collaboration and advocacy at the United Nations with regard to structural racism and police violence. But first, I want to also thank particularly Professor Garry and her students, and in particular Laura and Ava. They both have gave us so much support over the last several weeks as we have started to work with many other organizations in the United States to find everything we can in the Blue Book of Human Rights Advocacy to ensure that the United States at all levels will be held accountable. So I'm really grateful for the support, and it's really exemplary way that professors and clinics and students can engage in this important work, working in tandem with the groups like the ACLU and Mothers Against Police Brutality and others. So thank you. With my few minutes, I would like to share with you some of the things that we've been working on and what we were doing and what are the solutions for at least a human rights-based solution that we think would be helpful in addressing the human rights crisis that we have in the United States, which has been going on for a long time, but unfortunately with the barbaric torture to death of George Floyd, it got, for the first time in many, many years, perhaps maybe since Michael Brown's killing and Trayvon Martin's killing several years ago, it got a new attention by people in the United States, but also by many, many people around, or millions of people around the world. And it is really not completely disconnected from the reality of structural racism against Black people in particular in this country that they continue to live under, essentially like a second-class citizens in many, and we've seen that reflected in the devastation of the COVID-19 on communities of color, particularly on Black and Latinx communities. And the racial disparities has been only exacerbated by the disease, by the pandemic. But police violence is its own pandemic. It is its own health crisis, or public health crisis, just like any other health crisis, and should be taken very seriously. Unfortunately, it hasn't been taken very seriously by our policymakers. Besides perhaps certain actions that were taken were much more cosmetic, not really addressing the root causes, the real serious flawed systems that perpetuate the use of force against Black people, and essentially deprive them not of their right to life, but deprive their families and their communities the ability to live as equal citizens with dignity and access to all rights that should be afforded in any democracy. So with that premise, we have immobilized and we have worked since George Floyd's killing. And as we were seeing Black Lives Matter protests around the world, inspired by the protests in the United States, gaining momentum and gaining strength, and the call for change and radical change, we also wanted to see what can be done by international human rights mechanisms to address this problem in a fundamental way, rather than just a condemnation, rather than just talk, but actually doing something actionable, practical, something that would echo the demands of the movement for Black lives, the demands of many millions of people who were in the streets. And one of the things that we thought about it, well, how do we bring this to the attention of the world? It's already before the people on their TV screens, on their computer screens. They're already involved in actions, in protests. But it is really the action of government that normally is lagging behind. Just like we see in our government, that's not really responding to the calls for change. So we needed to really take a more unconventional approach to this crisis. And we thought that it's important to seek the attention of the highest human rights body in the United Nations system, that is the UN Human Rights Council. And while this council and this body is not perfect and it has some issues and problems, it is still one of the few bodies that where all the world come together to discuss and monitor human rights violations. And since the US, since the creation of the United Nations and the creation of human rights bodies, the United States has played a role in creating them, supporting them, and yet it always found a way to exempt itself from accountability and full scrutiny. We thought that this is the right moment to remind the United States and call on other governments to hold the US accountable for extrajudicial killings of Black people in the United States and other violations of, serious violations of human rights, particularly in the context of protests or racial justice protests. Now, seeking accountability before the United Nations is not a new thing. In fact, I've learned the history of going to the United Nations as I joined many colleagues in the racial justice movement, the human rights movement in the United States, after I moved to the United States, and learned more and more about the long history and legacy of leaders like W. Du Bois, who went to the United Nations in 1947 with the historic appeal to the world, where he called on the United Nations, as it was just forming, to take action to end lynching against Black people, to end segregation against Black people, to end the second-class citizenship of Black people in the United States. And that was inspired by actually a petition that was a shorter one that was issued in a year earlier, 1946, by the National Negro Congress, which was not even seriously addressed by the United Nations. The United Nations basically at the time said that we don't even have a mechanism to entertain or to deal or to discuss your petition. So W. Du Bois and the NAACP, with a 100 pages study and a petition that was formed by and drafted by Black scholars and advocates and academics, who basically put before the United Nations and before the world the struggle for racial justice of people of color, particularly Black people at that time. Now that was something that shook the world. The United States was not happy about this. The State Department tried very hard to undermine this effort and make sure that it's not going to be addressed, and even put pressure on the former First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, who was on the board of the NAACP, and she in turn tried to even put pressure on the NAACP to try to backtrack from this important initiative. Now, the United Nations at the time did not have the Human Rights Council. It did not even have the Commission on Human Rights, which was formed after 1940. At the time was in the formation, but it didn't have any mechanism of dealing with these kind of petitions. And yet this was seen as an important monumental move, which was followed in the early 50s by another initiative by the Civil Rights Congress, where it also addressed the United Nations by providing a petition. They called it "We Charge Genocide," which resonates to this day, where you have youth movement in Chicago, other organizations around the country, Black and Afro-descendant organizations, claiming this history and legacy and continuing to call for accountability and racial justice in the United States. So we really building on that history. And we went to the United Nations with a letter that we drafted, the ACLU, the US Human Rights Network, with a lot of support and participation with the leadership of Professor Gay McDougall, who is a renowned international expert on racial justice, and called for the United Nations Human Rights Council to hold a special session on the human rights crisis in the United States, which has never happened. United Nations system is often mobilized, not always. Sometimes it's being blocked by different political entities and governments, but often mobilized when there is a serious human rights crisis. We noted the fact that there were thousands of people being detained and arrested, hundreds of attacks on journalists who were reporting and covering the protests. We noted the number of people who have been killed in recent years with no accountability, in fact, encouraging a culture of impunity. And we were able within a few days to gather over 660 signatures from civil society organizations from all over the world. This petition or this letter was also endorsed by families of victims of police violence, including the family of George Floyd, that was at the time just dealing with exactly the same things that Collette shared with you: the grief, the pain, the realization that their son, their brother, their loved one is gone. And yet the brother of George Floyd agreed to address the United Nations Human Rights Council for the first time, I think, in the history of the council. In that context, that you have a family member that addresses the council in the opening of the session. And he called, and he carried the message of that letter, that is, there should be an international commission of inquiry to look into violations of human rights, particularly the killings of Black people in the United States. And specifically called for looking back as 2014 with the killing of Michael Brown up to the killing of George Floyd and others. The letter also, he called for accountability for and protection for those who are protesting. This demand was echoed by the African group. Essentially, the 54 countries, nations of Africa came together and requested the special session, the urgent debate that took place on June 16 of this year. And just a few days later, the Human Rights Council adopted a resolution that basically addressed the situation. Now, the draft resolution that was put forward, again, inspired by this letter and by the protesters, the Black Lives Matter protesters, called for the independent commission of inquiry to be established. It's never been even drafted. This was the first time that the UN had ever considered a draft resolution of a commission of inquiry against a country, a member of the permanent Security Council member, whereas most of those initiatives would be against countries that are not the powerful. Now, because of US pressure and bullying and threats that were made behind the scenes through diplomatic channels, and even though the United States is not even a member of the Human Rights Council, this resolution, this draft resolution, was watered down from a commission of inquiry that will be established and be formed and be led by independent experts to look into violence, police violence in the United States. It was watered down to a resolution that only asked the Office of the High Commissioner to establish or to examine the situation of police violence against people of African descent, and to report back to the Human Rights Council to write a report about the problem of police violence. The only mention of the United States was the reference to George Floyd's killing. The United States was not even mentioned and all references to the United States from the draft resolution was taken out because of the same pressure. Now, we knew that we were up against a very uphill battle in terms of our ability to get a final resolution that would establish such an important and effective mechanism. And we were not surprised by some of the pressures that was made. But it was important to do that because it was important to put such an issue before the international community. And then now we are, as we continue to work on making sure that this report, the very limited accountability that this resolution provided, we will make sure that the families, the victims of police violence are centered in that process of providing testimonies, evidence, their stories, their solutions. As you heard from Collette, they are the ones who know better than anyone else what needs to be done. So we are calling for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to make sure that there's an inclusive consultation, that her office holds hearings at the regional level, at the country level, and we are already working with many actors, both in the United States, other organizations from around the world, to make sure that this process, even if it's limited, that will really come out with follow-up actions and steps that will only increase the accountability mechanisms at the international level, including potentially calling for the establishment of a commission of inquiry, because as you can see, things are not changing very radically in the United States. There's a lot of talk, but that's not much action. So in terms of what are the solutions that we are looking for, I think recognizing that police violence is a structural problem. It is something that relates to institutional racism that has been within the system, the criminal legal system. And if you look back at the history of policing in the United States, you can see that history in some police departments were formed as part of the legacy of enforcing slavery. As a slave patrol, there was police security units that were essentially enforcing those slavery laws at the time. And over the years, enforced Jim Crow laws and segregation laws, and afterwards were even part and sometimes turned a blind eye to lynching and serious crimes against Black people. And even during the civil rights era, we've seen how police departments were used and mobilized and as an instrument of suppressing protest and peaceful assembly, and making sure that certain communities will be controlled. And we saw different variations of the way that police departments have been used in order to control and to repress basic rights of certain communities, particularly Black communities, whether in the context of the war on drugs, whether in the context of militarization of policing, and that would have a negative impact, again, on a broad range of rights, not just in the context of the right to life and the right to be free from torture and discrimination. Now, today, what we're calling for, as you heard from Collette, in addition to the traditional or more than decades-long demands of increasing accountability and transparency for policing, making them more accountable to civilian boards, and all the things that have been tried or have been requested. In some instances, in some jurisdictions, they were put in place, and yet they did not really address in a fundamental way the problem of police violence and the structural racism that is rooted in that problem. And therefore, you're seeing now the move and shift towards thinking about police violence and addressing police institutions. Are they really should be carrying all of these responsibilities that they are asked to do, dealing with mental health crises of many people that end up in killings or end up in serious disability for those people who are in crisis. Whether really police department should be acting like a military in a war zone with militarized weaponry that is provided by the federal government that is coming from the so-called war on terror after 9/11. So there's now a shift from investing in those police departments and funding them and divesting from them towards reinvesting in communities of color, in those rights, social economic rights that will allow people that to be able to to have life affirming alternatives rather than the other thing that I want to mention briefly before I end and we open it for questions is the question of the connections between police reform or radical structural change and reparations. This is a solution that is part of what the international human rights law offers. We are not only looking and talking about compensation or monetary compensation, we're looking at reparations as a framework that essentially puts the people who are directly impacted, directly affected by particular rights violations or human rights policies in order to make sure that they have all the support that they need in order to end and repair that damage and to look as far back as those institutions and mechanisms that sustained this kinds of wrong and violations. And so that there is a movement for reparations. As you know, there's HR 40 is now a bill that was introduced in Congress. It has over 150 members of Congress that are supporting or sponsoring it. And there is a movement at the state and local level, not just at the federal level, to ensure that policing is seen or is being reviewed as part of that history of the legacy or the outcome of slavery, racial discrimination during the decades and hundreds of years, and what is the solution coming out? There's also the call for creation, some sort of a reckoning with the history of police violence and lynching against Black people in particular, in the form of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which would allow people in the United States to be able to build a new future based on recognizing what happened, telling the truth, seeking reconciliation that is built on the understanding that no one is above the law, no one has more privileges than other, and really addressing the problem of white supremacy in the United States. So with that, and the last thing is ending criminalization, because a lot of the problems and a lot of the things that we often go to is to criminalize something because we think that is the right solution. It's really important to start thinking about decriminalizing a lot of things that are seen by society as the first go solution, particularly in the context of homelessness, particularly in the context of the war on drugs, particularly in the context of people with mental health. All of that will help make sure that people are living with their dignity, rather where they're pushed into a cycle and vicious circle of impoverished life without dignity. And lastly, the foreign policy of the United States. There's a connection that needs to be made between the foreign policy of the United States with regard to militarization and initiating wars and the heavy toll that it has on communities and peoples around the world, particularly on many civilian populations, and what it does to the United States in its ability to deal with domestic issues. It's not a coincidence that you see a lot of the weapons that have been tested abroad all of a sudden ends up being here tested in the United States, and it becomes part of what acceptable weapons, whether it's the militarization of policing or some of the connection between the use of torture and interrogation and or the conditions of confinement that we see that are inhumane, that amounts to torture, that gets to be replicated in the so-called U.S. war on terror. And that new look at how the U.S. behaves in the world, that should be based on its international human rights obligations at home, is a key to understanding and finding solutions that will really protect everyone's human rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamil. Before we turn to Q&A and take your thoughts and questions, Angie let me know that we had a technical glitch with regard to the video that Collette was going to show us. And in the spirit of Jamil's powerful comments that the voices of victims need to be heard, I want to see if we can try again to show the video before we go into Q&A. And if it doesn't work this time, my apologies. We'll post to the chat the link where you can find the video on MAPB's website. and we urge you to take a look, but hopefully it'll work this time. So let's go ahead and try to do this again. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Beatrice Roberson. My surname was Jamil Roberson. He was a security guard that was murdered on November the 11th, 2018 by a Midlothian police from Midlothian, Illinois. My son was a security guard. He was at work doing his job. Policeman came and my son was shot in his back 4 times. Although people was screaming and saying that he was security, he is with us, he's one of us, the policeman still shot my son in his back 4 times. I have never received an apology from Midlothian Police Department, from Robin Police Department, from the state's attorney's office in Illinois. No one. I haven't received anything from them. It's been hard. It's a horrible almost 2 years. I am seeking for justice for Jamil. This is my son, Jamil Roberson. It is too hard. Stop killing our kids.
Hello, my name is Denise RANKIN. This is my son, Deron Gaylor, who was brutally killed by Flint Police Department. My son was in a 11.5-hour standoff, held in the attic of the house, scared. My son was, he had a depression. He was bipolar and ADD. I was there the whole 11.5 hours where they shot him, sniped him out. The SWAT team was there. They sniped him out, shot him in his head. They tore down the house on his body. My son was treated like an animal once they got him to the ground. Eyewitness from a neighbor said they drugged my son across the grass like a dog to put him in a body bag. My son did not deserve this. You are not the judge. You was not the judge. You didn't give him a chance to get to the point where he could get a judge or a jury to say if he was guilty or not guilty. You took that in your hands. I pray that my son gets justice, because my life, my children's life, his sister, brothers, his kids' life would never be the same without him.
My name is Kathy Scott Likes. I am the mother of Jarvis Likes, 35-year-old unarmed Black man that was shot and killed on December 29, 2017 in Columbus, Georgia, by Georgia State Trooper Officer Michael Nolan. Jarvis was on his way to work that night, and en route, there was a DUI checkpoint set up, and Jarvis decided to turn around and go the opposite direction in order to get to work on time. Officer Michael Nolan saw Jarvis make the turn and decided to follow him into a residential area. Officer Nolan blocked Jarvis' car in and got out of his cruiser with his gun drawn on Jarvis. But instead of Officer Nolan probably just tasing him, he decided to shoot him up high instead of low. When I asked, could I go to the hospital to identify my son, the coroner told me I couldn't go and identify him, so I never got a chance to identify my son. And the next time I did see my son was his funeral on January the 6th, 2018, in his casket. My son's life mattered. My son should not have been killed. His death could have been prevented. We will continue this fight for justice for Jarvis.
Well, as Jamil said, it's really tough to follow that video and to hear the voices of all the mothers, and this is just a handful of the mothers and what they have gone through. At this point in time, I would like to give you all the opportunity to ask Collette and Jamil your questions. I see here in the chat a few questions that have been posed, and we'll certainly present those. But I was wondering, just coming off of that video, Collette, if maybe you could share with us just a little bit about your view and the view of MAPB with regard to using the global stage and why you think that's important, and what benefit, if you will, mothers, families, relatives of Black Lives Lost are getting from voicing their pain and their trauma before the world. And you just did so a couple days ago. What have been the responses to what you have to say? Do you get satisfaction through the process?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing about police brutality is it's almost, when I think about it, it's almost like COVID. You have some people that don't believe that it exists because we don't see the dead bodies. We don't see the faces of COVID. So it puts that ambiguity. It plants the ambiguity there. And the same for police brutality. Working with Jamil and the ACLU is really a game changer in this space because it requires global attention. The world needs to understand what is happening and what is going on, and to engage in this fight against police brutality. It takes it being in a cocoon, it being contained, it eliminates that. And so it's very important to have the space and being able to partner with organizations like the ACLU.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a question here with regard to litigation here in the United States and whether there is any national lawsuit at the moment on behalf of Black citizens and vulnerable populations against law enforcement nationwide. If you could speak to that. And then we'll start with that question, and then there's a follow-up from the same individual who's posed the question, Lena. Collette, would you like to tackle this, or perhaps Jamil?
I'm going to pass it to Jamil, but I will say that I am not aware of any such lawsuit.
Yeah, I don't think that there is such a lawsuit, and I think I don't think that there is it's possible at all to imagine a case that will be brought in such a broad case to be brought before U.S. court without specifically addressing a particular police department, particular jurisdiction. As you know, there's a lot of legal hurdles for getting standing, and that's obviously one of the problems of holding police departments accountable. It's not just, we're not, have to go that far to think about a one lawsuit against all police departments. The problem is that oftentimes you can't really hold single police departments accountable in one jurisdiction, and that is because a number of doctrines and a lot of laws that have really shielded police departments and police officers in particular from such lawsuits. And so you have limitations on the access to justice and access to remedy and effective remedy, including, as Collette mentioned earlier, the problems with qualified immunity and the way that has been utilized in order to shield and protect effectively police departments and police officers from civil accountability. You have also the fact that there is a very strong police unions that are step in as soon as there is a case of police killing and murder, and in a way to pressure and to do everything they do in order to make sure that that accountability is not really pursued in the best way that it can. And there's also a problem with, as Collette mentioned, the fact of the use of force policies are significantly problematic, where in some instances they really don't meet national standards or that don't exist. But I mean, in terms of federal law, as far as what the Supreme Court decision have made clear. But the problem is that itself need to be examined, meaning the Supreme Court decisions that have allowed certain police practices to exist need to be examined and need to be overruled or changed in order to bring the United States in line with international standards. There's a recent report that I recommend everyone on this Zoom call meeting to look at from the University of Chicago Global Human Rights Clinic that was issued last June, that looked at a number of jurisdictions and how police departments' own use of force policies and standard procedure really don't conform to international human rights standards as far as the use of force, when is necessary to use force, what's the proportionality requirement that is essential principle in any examination of use of force, how quickly the resorting to violence it is in the United States compared to many other countries where you don't see that sort of, and that rather you see de-escalation as something that need to be taken as a way to make sure that people are not hurt by police violence, or police officers are hurt by escalating the situation to something much worse. So there's a lot of those hurdles. I think that there's some aspects that I think it's important to address it, which is the fact that in the context of police accountability, we also don't see the Justice Department, the federal government under the Trump administration, doing its obligations under current laws. There are laws that were passed by Congress that requires the Justice Department Civil Rights Division to initiate what we call pattern or practice investigations. That is to look at the behavior of police departments that have exhibited, demonstrated, documented instances of use of force, unlawful or unconstitutional use of force. And those investigations have not been happening since January of 2017. In fact, the Trump administration have done everything to block and to obstruct certain cases that went to court, consent decrees that were reached by different police departments and the Justice Department at the time. And they are sending the message that police departments should not be subject to such federal scrutiny and oversight. So this is the kind of thing that we need to be changed immediately, that the Justice Department has to play that role. In the United States, we don't have a Human Rights Commission that has the power. We have a Civil Rights Commission, but unfortunately, it doesn't have as much power as other entities that oversee police departments in other countries. So the only oversight that we have at the federal level that is not supposed to be subject to local and state political pressure is really the Civil Rights Division. And so we think that there's a lot of problem with that. And and finally, most cases that end up with no criminal convictions or no criminal indictments at the state level, hard to prosecute them at the federal level. Most of these cases are closed because the legal bar is so high to meet the requirement of what is necessary to prove beyond reasonable doubt that the police officers had taken the life of someone willfully took the life of someone and violated their constitutional right. And most of the time, the police officers, again, with the help of police unions, come immediately, their response is, we acted in self-defense. We thought that the person had a gun. We thought that they're moving their hand into their pocket to get some weapon, or they had a knife, or they had something that made us behave in a self-defense situations. And therefore, we have not resorted to force in order to willfully take and violate their right to life and other constitutional right under our federal laws. And therefore, most of these instances, unfortunately, even during the Obama administration, were closed because of that high legal bar. In fact, former Attorney General Holder, at the end of his term, at his time at the Department of Justice, highlighted the need for revising and passing legislation in order to make sure that federal legislation and federal powers allow the Justice Department to prosecute police department officers, especially when state law or state attorney generals and the state level prosecution does not provide accountability for all sorts of reasons.
Thank you, Jamil. Another question that has come through, I think, is for you, Collette. It has to do with parents of Black children. And the question is it constitutional for Black parents to have the talk with their children about discussing how to survive an encounter with the police?
I don't know if it's constitutional, but it is life-saving. It is real. It happens. I remember the first time Clinton wanted to stay at the park with some of his guy friends. He was 14 years old. I was terrified. And the things that Black parents have to tell their Black sons and daughters is, if you're stopped, comply. Just try and get home. But then we know that if you run into the right policeman that wants to kill, that's not even good enough. So yes, that really happens. I mean, and it's been happening for a long time. I've talked to many parents that have to have that talk. I mean, it's almost sacred in the Black household. It's part of growing up. It's part of, it's traditional, unfortunately, because you feel that if you don't have that talk with your son or daughter, that you have failed them. You have not equipped them to know what could possibly happen to them. Just going to the store, just minding their business. So yes, it does exist, and it's very real. And those talks do happen.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, as you say, it is critical, right, to have those talks for saving their lives. And yet under our Constitution, they shouldn't be treated that way, right?
Absolutely.
They should be treated equally, fairly. They should be able to live their lives in freedom, just as all should in this country, regardless of their status and their race. Thank you for that. Another question was, how do you address the situation where there's an increase of violence in certain communities and the police are being defunded in that community? How do you deal with this call for this push for defunding of the police, and who's to take care of then the increased violence, or a situation where violence might potentially become an issue?
I'm happy to start. I'm sure Collette would have some also good thoughts on this, because we often talk about the way that the issue is being framed. I think that the question is really, think about white communities. Why white communities don't have the kind of violence that is usually used in order to mobilize over policing, or use policing and violence, police violence. And you look at the disparities in terms of the quality of life, in terms of their access to those basic fundamental human rights, in terms of education, health, housing, employment, everything that you would have a decent life, and you will have a quality of life that really lives to protecting someone's human dignity. If you have those, then I think that's much harder to see violence, happening in the way that, it's always portrayed as if, and that's one of the things that is really outrageous in some allegations or some comments that were made by U.S. government officials, that the problem is, the reason we have police violence is because we have more criminal activity, because there's more crime in those communities. And that's why we have to use over policing. And so I think the question is, have we ever tried to really shift the thinking about this by saying, can we invest more resources and making really a real commitment to those communities that have been deprived of first-class quality education, employment, housing, all the things that you need in order to have a good life and successful life, that will not then put you in that position where you have to deal with people going into a crisis mode and going through serious challenges in life. That is a question. That's how you shift. That's why it's not really defunding as much as thinking that what is the role of the police in democratic society? Is the role of police institutions to control and to patrol certain communities in order to do this kind of law and order? Is that really the role that we want to see in democratic society? Let's compare it to other societies. Why is it that it worked in other societies and we don't have that percentage? Why is it that a Black person is 3 times more likely to be shot and killed than white person in the United States? The same, by the way, the disparity applies to Latinx and indigenous people. When recent study that we did at the ACLU found that even during COVID, fatal shootings continued unabated. So even when there's crime, there was low crime rates in certain times because of lockdown, and still there were instances of fatal shootings. So the question is, there's a question of how are you really dealing with decades and years and centuries of lack of value of life in certain communities, particularly Black lives. And when you shift that around, you will see that then you'll see the different role for police in this regard. You'll see there's no need for the police because you are already addressing some of the issues that are fundamental in order to make sure that you don't get to a point where you are talking about particular communities only in terms of crime rates.
Collette, did you want to add on?
Yeah, I agree with what Jamil was saying. In Dallas, for instance, our city, our future did work on defunding the police. And they did a very in-depth study in communities and asked the communities, what do you want policemen to do? I mean, and if they would take the time to talk to communities, it's like any other communities, they want to feel Black communities and brown communities want to feel safe, but what they don't want is the over policing. Like when Jason Harrison's mom calls the police to help her get him to the hospital so he can take his meds, and they kill him within 8 seconds of showing up. So, and Jamil and I have had conversations about how at the beginning of the defunding police, how it was framed. And I think that for me personally, had it been framed just a little bit differently, that explained what that meant, right? Divesting and reinvesting into communities, like taking $2 million perhaps out of a police budget and creating a service that will answer distress call from mentally ill people instead of sending the police to take those calls. Those are things that community needs, and especially Black and brown communities, they don't have that. They don't have, they're in food deserts. They don't have grocery stores. They don't have clinics where they can get proper health care. So reallocating some of those funds into those Black and brown communities would be a game changer all around.
Thank you so much for that, Collette. And I can resonate so much with regard to what we ask our police forces to do in responding to situations of mental illness. Obviously, my family's not Black, but I am the sister of a man who was schizophrenic and passed away 10 years ago. And we were a low-income family. So this issue of police being the first responders in mental health situations, our family experienced firsthand as well. And he was, treated badly by police, not badly intentionally, but they weren't trained to handle him well as a schizophrenic. And constantly the police were being asked to take care of him, and we were subjected to the mercies of the state of Illinois because we didn't have the money and the wherewithal to take care of the needs of my brother. And so it is a huge problem. And I'm really glad that you point that out in particular. And I want to recognize one of our participants today and give her the opportunity. She's a mother of a Black victim of police violence, of a young son who was mentally ill. So Dr. Anita Harris lost Dontre Williams in December of 2011 to the Gwinnett Police Department. And Dr. Harris, I wondered if you wanted to share a bit about the story of your son or ask any questions today with regard to our discussion with our panelists.
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to know, well, to share a little bit about what happened on December 17th. He had found a, rusted machete next door, but he wasn't doing anything to it. But we had a unlicensed therapist that came to the home and found out that she wanted to do we hadn't seen her since before Thanksgiving. So this was after Thanksgiving, and she wanted to come to the home, I guess, to make up her notes. And she kept pressuring him about a little incident that happened because I was getting ready to change over to another organization for help. And so he did not want to talk, and he went and got his machete, and he had immediate explosive disorder, went into a rage, and he asked her to leave. I asked her to leave, and she said, well, I got to do a family intervention. And I said, well, he doesn't want to talk. You need to go. So that's when he went outside in his tour house and brought it back in. And he was just trying to intimidate her to ask her to leave. But he's just started hollering everything. And he had been home with no medicine. I had been calling the organization, the doctor to send his meds in, but they never did. So he was doing good without his meds, but this made him really upset when she was trying to make him talk. And so I called, she called her boss, and the boss said, call crises. We called crises, but the police overheard the call. And crises came and was one man, and then we were waiting on another crisis that we knew that always came and was able to, talk to him and everything. But the police came and overrided crises. And when he calms down, he usually take a walk, or he usually go to sleep. So he said he wanted to walk. He always go take a walk around the corner, which everybody knew him. He found a tree with a hump on it, and he just sits there and think. So when he opened the door, we didn't even know what was out there, had surrounded our house. And when he opened the door, he was holding the machete in one hand and holding the storm door in the other. And he looked back. You can tell the fear in his eyes. And I said, what's wrong? And then they said, drop the weapon. He dropped it. And I'm standing behind him on the step, and they started open firing, shooting in the house. And I didn't know what was out there. So while he dropped the weapon, they were shooting. I ran to the window, and it was like about 20 cars out there. My yard was surrounded. And then they said, come to us. After they unshot him and shot all up in the house, we could have got shot. And he was dragging. He had hurt his ankle coming off the porch while they were shooting. He was trying to dodge bullets. And they shot him. 6 hit him and 1 exit wound. And he fell dead from, on the yard in the driveway. Well, he hadn't died yet. They wouldn't let me come to him. He was hollering, mama, mama. I was trying to get to him. They always push me back and throw me back on the porch. And they were waiting on him to take the last breath before they called paramedics. They kept bending down, seeing was he still alive. And after he did his last breath, that's when they let paramedics come. Paramedics tried to revive him, but he was dead. And they took him on to the hospital. They would not let me leave the house. Detectives was asking me questions. Then they said that they had revived him, but the autopsy said he was dead on arrival. And but they told me they had revived him. He was in a room and a police officer was outside the door, but that was not true. And when I called the police station and everything, they said, you'll never see your son till he reached the funeral home. And that's what they told me. And I asked the funeral home, do not touch his body do not touch anything, because this is my first time seeing him when he reached your funeral home. And we took pictures and everything. And I had a case was dropped. The DA said the police was in the right. They had a right to shoot him running toward them with the machete, but he never was running. But that's what they said. They came up on the porch and got the machete off the porch and laid it beside him. And that's what, and then I also had Al Sharpton's team in Atlanta. I had gave my pictures to Marcus Coleman, which he did away with my pictures, my evidence. And so that closed, right there, it closed my case. But I've been looking into it because that's 17 rounds that they found is overkill, especially for a child. So that's why I've been trying to just hold on and hoping that justice would come for not just for my case, but for other people's case. Not just looking for these present cases, but cases that's happened 2010, 2011, and on up to now. There's similar cases, and they need to be looked into. And I even wrote the president. And the people that's over the crime or whatever you call at the White House said if he dropped that weapon, they should be held accountable. But the DA thought that letter was funny from the White House. But I have not gave up. I'm waiting on justice to prevail. Not for the present cases, like I said, but from the past cases also, because they all similarity. Police violence, overkill. And I thank y'all for just giving me a chance to, just speak out for Dontre. And we still want justice for Dontre Williams. He was 15 with a small frame of a 12-year-old. Now, why would they shoot and kill a child like that? He cannot hurt them at all. And they supposed to be trained. If he was running in the driveway toward them, what's wrong with stunt gun, plastic bullets or whatever? This child couldn't hurt you at all. So thank you for just giving me a chance to, express my feelings.
Dr. Harris, there are no words for what you've gone through, and we thank you for raising your voice today, and we remember Dontre.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've come to the end of the hour, and I just want to ask one more question, if you don't mind, and Collette. For those of us here that have been very moved, and I think I can speak for all of us, how can we come alongside your critical efforts moving forward to bring about systemic change here in the United States, to seek truth and reconciliation and justice for the families, not only, as Dr. Harris said, for the present cases in the past 6 months, but what's been going on for years and decades in this country? Do you have any thoughts for us?
I think it's important for one thing that was particularly interesting for me being a part of this today was that young law students were going to be on this call. And that's what we need. We need the young law students to understand what qualified immunity means, to understand what Tennessee versus Garner mean, to understand what families really go through when they lose a loved one. And I think when you put all of that together, we will start to see attorneys that are better equipped to really help families fight these cases. There are only a handful of attorneys that know how to litigate and how to represent families against, when they lose a loved one. And I think it is so important to get law students involved and to understand the processes and to really understand how the system works, and to inhale it, to embrace it, and to come to the table with a different mindset than the old guards. I think that is so important. I think it's a game changer. It would be a game changer in how we move forward with finding justice for victims of police brutality.
Thank you so much. Jamil, did you have any, is there any way that we can also come alongside the efforts of the ACLU in this fight?
Well, you know, as I said, you're already supporting and you're doing a lot. I think as I would echo Colette's words about the role of the new generation of lawyers and advocates. I mean, you don't even have to be a lawyer to do something meaningful. But since we are in a forum that is organized by a law school, there's no doubt that there's a new generation of lawyers and advocates that are really going to have the responsibility to take their legal profession more seriously in a way that is more ethical and more rooted in human rights and the lives of everyone are worth and matter. And that is a shift. Maybe in it, you know, if you are able to volunteer your time to be a legal observer, do that. You can easily get trained to be a legal observer for what is going on. If you're able to be involved in any local action that could use your background as you know, a future human lawyer, do that in the context of elections, in the context of racial justice, in context of any work that is done in order to provide support. Maybe there is a need now to think about, you know, there's all this pride in the United States that, you know, creating the Peace Corps, right? You know, people going abroad and joining, volunteering to promote peace and justice abroad in really important areas around the world. But we don't really have those kind of initiatives when it comes to our crisis here at home, our human rights crisis. So it is maybe thinking about how this could turn into making people be able to be supported in order to support communities in the way that these communities see fit. You know, we need them to be the allies. We need them to be the partners, not the ones that to speak on behalf of communities, as we are trying to do more and more as an ACLU or as an organization that has traditionally been working on supporting people who their rights are violated, and now improving the way that we do that. So I maybe we should be seeing more freedom summers in the sense of law students going and spending their summers in the service, in support of communities that may need that sort of support in whatever they are doing to promote their human rights at the local level, at the state level, and the federal level. And that is something that really comes from creating the space that you already created for us to have this conversation. So I want to thank you. I want to thank Dr. Harris for sharing her story and for her unwavering commitment to justice, not only for her son, but also for other families. And I'm just honored that I was able to be part of this conversation and working with Collette and many other families in order to see the change happening to other people in the United States.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jamil. Thank you, Collette. Thank you, Dr. Harris. I think I speak on behalf of all of us that we are deeply moved by your and inspired by your voices and by your work. And the fight for justice continues. And we so appreciate the time that you've taken. We know you're extremely busy and you're doing critical work. And we really just appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. If you don't mind, I would like to share with the group, if possible, links to the ACLU's website and also MAPB. I think that's already up. But in the aftermath of this discussion, we can also circulate information for folks who want to get involved at a deeper level. But I want to thank all of you just for coming today and for participating in this very important discussion. Thank you for your time, and I wish you all the very best in the rest of your day and weekend. Take care.
Thank you, Anna, for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.